I was on the train home and I was like literally pushed up against people. There was a man next to me and he would like started touching my leg. After a bit, I realized that he knew exactly what he was doing because it got more aggressive, and I had I think it was 15 minutes until the next stop. I just froze in that moment. I didn't call out to anyone.
You were afraid that people might think you're just playing victim and there's nothing wrong.
It's called the bystander effect, where no one does anything. If I draw attention, it might make him angry. Every time I get on the train, I do think about that.
I've actually had a similar incident. I haven't told a lot of people about it because of shame. Well, I was on a platform, a very tall, muscular man who was wearing summer clothes in the dead of winter walked up to me, looked me up and down. So immediately I knew that something may not be right. I get on my carriage, so I walked to the far end, turned around, and he was right behind me. Straight away I'm thinking, how do I protect myself? He was 6'5". Next thing I know, he's stood right in front of me, staring at me. He's got a bum bag in front of him, which has got his hands in something. What has he got in his bum bag? The train comes to a stop. In the last moment I slid out, the door shut. He looked at me through the glass, put his hands up and licked the whole glass, right? That gave me a really true insight. Not that I didn't understand before, but what it feels like for someone to put that sort of pressure and cross boundaries which shouldn't be crossed.
Yeah.
Every man carries something. Expectations, silence, struggles, the weight of having to look unbreakable. The Dad Project is a home for real, unfiltered conversations on men's mental health, the kind that have been missing for far too long. We share powerful stories and raw perspectives from those living it and those guiding men through it. Filmed at the Old Court in Windsor, it's about breaking silence, reshaping strength, and creating conversations that actually matter. I'm your host, Naroop Duty. Let's talk. Before we start, let me take 30 seconds and speak to you directly. This podcast exists to share real stories, honest conversations that inspire growth, self-belief, and meaningful change. If you get value from these episodes, following or subscribing is the easiest way to support what we're building here. It helps this reach more people who appreciate authentic conversation, and it allows us to keep creating stories like this. All right, thank you for being here. Now, into the episode. Amy, before Hassl existed, where were you at that point in your life, and what were you wrestling with personally?
I think when I started Hassl, I was very, conflicted about what I wanted to do with my life, because I really enjoyed the job that I was in, and I had a really good team and was living by myself in London, all that kind of stuff. But I just knew something was missing. And I think that was kind of, being in my later 20s, that was kind of the thing that I was, front of mind for me, because I always knew I wanted to do social impact and I wasn't doing that. And I think it was kind of, I loved my job and I loved what I did, but it always felt like something was missing. And yeah, it didn't ever really feel quite me, if that makes sense.
When you say something was missing, what does that mean?
I think just, I've always had this drive to do, I've always seen so much disadvantage in the world, and so many people that I feel are disadvantaged through no fault of their own and through purely a lottery. And I felt that from being so young. And I think it was just, I always knew that I wanted to do something with my life that changed that and take advantage of the privilege I did have to speak for those who didn't have that opportunity. And yeah, as I say, I ended up in the place I was in because of COVID. Otherwise, I would have been doing social impact right out of university. But yeah, COVID definitely made me rethink how it made me rethink a lot. We literally were talking about this before, but I used to be very, people talk about type A and type B. And I used to be a really type A person. Everything was planned to the nth degree. Yeah. And then my last year of uni, I'd spent planning my social impact. I didn't do anything else. It was just this is what I want to do after uni. And then COVID hit as I was graduating or whatever. And it just, everything that I planned was not possible anymore. And that was the first time where I felt really like out of control, I guess. So yeah, I think it completely changed. And then I moved to London, literally just spontaneously, like went to visit my friend and never went back home. Like my parents just sent all my stuff down to London. It was like the most spontaneous thing. And yeah, I think I've become very type B in a lot of ways since then.
So you said you always wanted to start a social impact company. Where do you think that desire to create change came from? Because you said that you'd seen people who are disadvantaged, but a lot of people have seen that. We see it all day long. We see adverts on TV, we see posters. It doesn't mean we then decide we want to create change. There must have been something in your life, if you trace it back, that happened and made you think, actually, I don't think this is good enough, what's happening out there. There needs to be change, right?
Yeah. I think I credit my parents like a lot. They hold very similar values to me. And I think that like they literally support me like, you know, so much. And I've always kind of had everything I need to an extent and, you know, had a really supportive network around me and stuff like that. I think I don't really know, I guess, what it was that when I was younger, but I can remember just, you know, one of my like, it sounds so strange, but like one of my core memories is, you know, we used to do, as kids, we used to do like the shoebox appeal. And it was like to send gifts to countries like people living in poverty, kids that wouldn't get gifts for Christmas. And I just remember saying to my mum, surely Santa gives more gifts to those, like, surely it's the rich families that the parents can do that themselves. It should be Santa, you know, before I knew Santa wasn't real. Spoiler. But, you know, like I remember saying that and being like, I don't think Santa can be real if this is, why are we making shoebox? And that's such a, I guess, strange thing for a child to think about, but it's something that I remember so clearly. Just thinking like, that doesn't make sense. Like, surely Santa prioritizes those who have nothing. If he's giving all the kids gifts.
So it's a childhood trait, right? Which
I think I've had it from very young. And as I say, I think I credit my parents a lot for it. But they'd probably still say that I was a bit more extreme than them, probably.
Well, before you came onto the podcast and as we knew you were going to be a guest, I did a deep dive. You know, we had heard about the work that you've done. It's really inspiring, but I wanted to get to know more about you. And I was so inspired that someone can have an idea and turn it into something like this. And it mirrors what we've done. An idea and it turns into something. You had an idea to create change, social change. Why did you pick the field that you're working in now? Why did you start Hassl, and what was the origin story of that?
I think, I mean, when I was younger, I did other social impact stuff, if that's what you want to call it. You know, like I did volunteering and I did start a social impact whilst I was at university that was around homelessness, because that was another thing that I used to do when I was at uni, would just go and sit with homeless people and talk to them and stuff. I just, again, a lot of the time it's through consequence of circumstance. And I felt like there was so much judgment around homeless people and all that kind of stuff. So that's another really big thing for me. And that was kind of the thing that I started first, but it was really hard. It was really challenging. And I was running my social enterprise where I was from, but I was at uni 2.5 hours away. So I was going back home every weekend, like volunteering, running that. And then I also had another business in Newcastle, which was where I was at uni. So it wasn't sustainable long term, but that gave me, I guess, like a taste of social impact. And like, I think for me, it was more why I started with this topic, I guess, was because it just came out of personal frustration. Like I had so many experiences, especially after I moved to London. I mean, obviously from growing up, but especially after moving to London, I think just because, you know, even just like you use public transport a lot more and it's a lot highly populated area and things, you know, you're going to experience more stuff. I do a lot of things where I'm traveling by myself or whatever. And yeah, I think it just came from like so many conversations as well. Like every conversation I would have in a meeting, or I'd go to a networking event or whatever it is. And so often when I was talking to women, that would come up really early, even if it was completely unrelated to why we were there. And yeah, I kind of always say the tipping point for me was that one of my colleagues, who I've actually worked with at 2 companies and now works for Hassl, she had an experience and essentially did all the, I don't want to say did all the things right, but did all the things that you're kind of told to do. Like she managed to get evidence. She kind of fought back, you know, she kind of tried to stand her ground and all that kind of stuff. Went to the police and they basically were like, there's nothing, like, we're not going to do anything. And that was like the tipping point for me, because I think when it happens to you, it's one thing, but when it happens to someone you care about, that's like the next level, isn't it? Where you really, and yeah, I always say just everything out there felt like it was constantly download this safety app, buy this product, do this self-defense class. And, you know, I always say I think there's a place for those things. I don't think they're the absolute devil of the world, but everything was focused on giving women more stuff to do. And even the women who do all of those things still have so many experiences. It doesn't stop it. The only way we really stop it is stopping it at the root, creating a safer world, stopping male violence especially, you know, and that's, it's not that those things can't run alongside in the meantime and give people some peace of mind or sense of security, but the reality is, even like a lot of the self-defense products and stuff, women end up like going to court and things and getting into trouble for using those things. So it's a really tricky situation. And I just wanted to, I believe that all social issues should be solved in this way, you know, prevention.
So what are men misunderstanding, do you find, about, you talk about male violence, women getting harassed? What do you think the misunderstanding is?
I always say that we operate based on this scale, so that everyone of all genders sits along a scale, and women typically sit higher up because they tend to have experienced it more and are generally more likely to advocate because they can relate more. But everyone sits on that scale. There's still women who victim blame, who have internalized misogyny, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I like to say that everyone sits on a scale and everyone can do more. Like even me, even doing Hassl, like I can still do more every day. There's more things I can do. And I think if we work on that basis, it's trying to meet people where they are. I think from everything that we've done, a lot of the gap with men comes from the fact that, and this is not to blame women at all, but that women have normalized this so much and society has taught us to normalize it so much that we don't really talk about it, especially not to men. We often talk about it to our friends, or we'll even like laugh it off and stuff because, you know, I did that. I'd be like, oh, this guy followed me here. And then you just kind of laugh about it, which sounds awful, but that is the place that we've got to. And I think that's where the biggest gap here is, where there is women who are now at the point where they're so frustrated of having to live this every day and do all this stuff. And there's enough men who would care if they were more aware, but we don't often have these conversations. So there's like a big gap in the middle. And, you know, a lot of people kind of don't like what we do because they say, you know, men should go and educate themselves and all that kind of stuff. And I do not in any way preach for women to go and teach men, but I do think it's important, not just with this issue, but with every issue, that we give people the tools to put themselves in those shoes, to understand. And like, I'm choosing to do that. I think we can either say, this is how an ideal world is, you know, every man educates himself and completely gets the problem and that's it. But that's not the reality of the world we live in the same way with racism, with homophobia, with anything. If you're in the group that isn't typically the most disadvantaged by it or oppressed or whatever, it's harder to be in the shoes of those who live it every day. And I think it's really important to not write people off as that's just the way it is, because then, well, let's just not bother doing anything ever and nothing would ever change. But yeah, I think a lot of it is just like not really understanding how often it happens. And it's not like, a lot of the time we talk about the experience of it happening or the aftermath, but we try and talk a lot about like the mental load day to day, like all the things we've been taught, you know, all the tiny micro calculations you're doing constantly. And it's one of the things we talk about in the men's group a lot, which obviously the men who work with us tend to be like higher up that scale, right? But even them, like we talk about stuff and I say, you know, there's things like if I get in a lift and I realize I'm the only woman in there, I'll immediately I'm just conscious because now I'm in a trapped space. Or same if you get in a tube carriage and you're the only woman, just because it's so conditioned into our brain to think that way. Walk past a car and the engine's on. I wouldn't walk too close to the door, especially at night, because what if they open it and grab me? All these tiny micro things. And then not just that, but all the things we do to try and keep ourselves safe because we've been taught it's on us to stay safe. You know, the classic carrying your keys between your fingers, sharing your location, texting people, constantly updates of where you are, wearing certain things so you don't get stared at, like just so many things, and having to constantly think about that. And a lot of women don't even realize they're thinking about it until we talk about it.
So why do you think society pushes women to change rather than actually saying, you know, that the behavior needs to change of society in general? Why do we think that it's a woman's up to the woman to do it and not for the men to learn?
Yeah, I think a lot of societal issues are tackled in this way because typically, again, if you go look at like racism, homophobia, whatever, it's typically the people not experiencing those problems day to day that are in more of the positions of power and influence. So it's easier to go, you know, you do better and you won't be harassed, assaulted, whatever. And, you know, there is such a narrative around like victim blaming still. And as I say, it's not that just men do that. Like, see it from women a lot too, where the narrative is you didn't do enough and that's why that happened to you. And I do think a lot of women also uphold that narrative because it gives them a sense of security, because it's like, if I think she caused it, as long as I do enough, that's never going to happen to me. I think it's almost like a survival kind of thing. Whereas, you know, there's loads of like amazing projects that there's one in Australia called What Were You Wearing? And it's just like a gallery of just like all the different outfits that women were in when they were assaulted, you know.
And what did that show?
Wedding dresses, nappies, school uniforms. It's not about what you're wearing that makes it happen. And there's no real like statistical evidence to say, but that's the narrative. It's like, if you wear the right things, you won't be assaulted. That's just one thing, obviously.
That's really interesting, because I was going to say that when you talk to men, not all men, right? They all say, well, she shouldn't be dressed like that. She's getting attention, right? And so there's two ways to look at that, right? I think. Yes, if a woman's wearing a short skirt and heels and has her makeup done, she looks beautiful, she's going to get attention. Right? Women are aware of that. I'm coming out dressed, I know I'm going to get attention. Doesn't mean that it gives permission to anyone to try to do anything, right? But then men sometimes think that they're bringing it upon themselves, right? But then I also think danger is danger, right? If I'm in an area late at night, even if I'm traveling home on the tube, I take my watch off, I take my rings off, I take my jewelry. I know that if I show value, I can become a victim. So do you think there is a conversation around, if you know you could be attracting attention, maybe it makes sense to try to make yourself not stand out in that environment, right? Without saying you cannot do that. It's not saying don't do it. Just if you know there's certain environments where you could attract attention, it makes sense to secure yourself, to make sure that you don't become a victim of danger. Is that a correct way to think? I
think it's such a good point to bring up because it's a really common narrative, and obviously it's easy to compare, like you said, to the thing is you can take off a watch and stuff and people don't know that you've got it. They know that a woman has that body part or whatever, right? Regardless. So you can't there's also no evidence to say, you know, there's women in niqabs, hijabs, all kinds of, there's no statistical evidence. That's just like a false narrative that's painted that is to do with it. So obviously, like you said, like if you're walking around with your mobile phone out in London, you're more likely to get your mobile phone nicked. Absolutely. And, you know, we always say there is a level of personal safety. Absolutely. Like that's just like locking your door of your house or whatever. The problem is that the personal safety, when it comes to this issue, disproportionately lands on women. And there's so many additional things that then affect decisions that you make, opportunities, all that kind of stuff. And that's where we have to rewrite it, because as well, like when you're talking about, you know, violence towards men, which is absolutely an issue. And it's something that we talk about as well, because it's still typically men who are committing the violence towards other men. So solving male violence is like of benefit to all of these issues, right? But violence towards men tends to be more situational. Like you said, I can avoid high crime areas. I can, you know, it's in places of conflict or in certain, you know, high crime areas, whatever it is. women's tends to be far more universal. It doesn't matter, you know, we are in 120 countries already across the world. We've got countries that are the most progressive, have the most equal rights out of anywhere in the world. Then we have countries that are the most poverty stricken, whatever. We have countries of all different cultures, religions, you know, ethnicities, whatever. It's universal. It's sometimes in different formats or whatever, but it's not that, oh, where there's wealth, there's just none of this stuff happens. It just happens in a different way. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
In the, you know, and obviously like with, you know, being robbed or whatever, there's also typically more of a sympathy and empathy and level of belief of someone who's mugged. Whereas there's often more doubt placed, again, because it typically happens to women, and typically like that whole thing of typically men were in positions of power to make the laws and are in law enforcement, all that kind of stuff. And it's that whole thing around being believed as well. That's another whole barrier.
Yeah.
And like you said, if the narrative continues that you did something to bring it on yourself, you know, a lot of the time people would immediately, if you've been mugged, people are like, that's awful. And you can like have empathy.
Yeah.
A lot more of the time when people say this happened to me, because we've been so conditioned to doubt that, even though it's so common. And again, it's a societal, it's a conditioning thing. It's not saying that every single person is bad for thinking that way. Like a lot of the time I think things because that's what and then I immediately unthink it because I've trained myself not to. But when society's telling you constantly, well, if something like that happens, you brought it on yourself.
You
know?
made so many interesting points then when you say it's not about where you are, because it can happen everywhere. And some of it's like really subtle, right? And as men, it's a bit of ego, it's a bit of power. Like I remember a friend was telling me that in the same week, she had 2 meetings where after the meetings, the man hugged her, rubbed her back, and then his hand went down past the bottom, just kind of grazed it. And for him, he's trying to get something out of it, but that sat with her. Yeah. And that's not violence, but it's crossing boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on the scale. It's just lower down. Yeah.
And so that's in a meeting situation.
Yeah.
For work.
Yeah.
Right? And that doesn't happen for men. You know,
it's just it's as I say, it's the mental load, because now that woman's thinking, the next time I'm in a meeting with that man, am I going to try and avoid him, or am I going to not go to that meeting, or should I say something, or has he done that to another woman and I should do, and it's this whole mental like thing that goes on. It's not, as I say, I think a lot of the time people think about like sexual violence and whatever as it happening and the trauma afterwards and the healing kind of process, which obviously is awful. But like pretty much every woman, even if, I mean, every woman has stories of this, but like, even if you've not got kind of the more severe end of the stories, you're living with this mental load every single day. Yeah. Even women who I guess are the most opposite end of the spectrum in terms of like maybe don't believe in like feminism and all that kind of stuff, they still think about these. When we talk about it, they're like, yeah, obviously I think about that. And sometimes they don't even realize that men don't think about that.
What does that make a woman feel, right? Because I think a lot of the understanding of change and behavior change is to understand how someone feels when an event happens. Yeah. Now, I am very empathetic towards what you're doing because, one, I'm a father of a daughter. Yeah. So I immediately put whatever woman's in the situation, I think if my daughter was in that, how would I feel? Yeah. Right? But as men, I think sometimes it's difficult because, you know, we know as men, women rarely are going to show us attention unless we instigate something, right? There are men out there who might get a woman approach them, right? Odd occasion, a woman might shout something out, but probably very rarely that ever happens. So our experiences of female attention, unless we instigate it, are quite low, even on dating apps. Yeah. The man has to make the move, right? The man has to start the conversation. Yeah. On the man, right? So we don't know what it feels like to be in that situation. Yeah. Right? But if we understand the feeling, I think if women, or even if yourself now, if you could share with me even a small incident, how does that make you feel? You know, how do you process that? What does that do to your ego, your sense of self, your boundaries, how you then approach men moving forward?
Yeah. I think I'll say the story first, and then I think there's like so many good points to I guess go into in terms of like, because we have it a lot where men say, like you said, oh, I would like it if a woman showed me attention, because they kind of see it as a flipping in an equal way, but it's not. So I can like definitely go into that. As I say, I've had a lot of experiences, I guess, relatively spread out across the scale. And I think one of the things that I think personally talking about human stories is so important, because I think a lot of the time, and not to talk down about anyone else's work, but we talk about statistics and stuff a lot, especially like even with things like immigration and stuff. We talk about statistics all the time, and people don't connect statistics to real people, real human beings, real lives, and real emotions and all that kind of stuff. So we do like a lot in like our workplace training and stuff. I do try and share personal stories, or we have ambassadors that share stories and things. So like one of my experiences, for example, I was on the train home. So I'm from the north of England, if you can't tell. And I was on the train home. The trains are always awful. And I was kind of stood in the little in-between bit of the train because it was so packed. And I was like literally pushed up against people for, it's like a 4-hour journey. And there was a man next to me, and his suitcase was next to him. And he would like started touching my leg. And I was, because immediately you want to think the best in people, especially that is my mentality. So I was like, he thinks he's touching his suitcase. Like he thinks he's holding it, or he thinks he's trying to find the zip or something. Like that was my thought. And then, so I kept kind of like jolting my knee to be like, you're touching me, and thinking he would go, oh, I'm so sorry. After a bit, I realized that he knew exactly what he was doing, because it got more aggressive, and I obviously knew that he knew what was going on. And then I had like, I think it was like 15 minutes until the next stop. And I was just froze. And, you know, I always say like, I'd like to think I'm a pretty confident person, and, you know, I'm not a teenage girl who's having like first few experiences of this. Like I've experienced it a lot. And I just froze in that moment. I didn't call out to anyone. I didn't, you know, approach him. And to be honest, it was probably a relatively safe environment to do that. It wasn't down a dark alley or whatever. You know, I was on a public train with loads of people around. I think I just froze, and I think it was my body's reaction. And almost like, I think I couldn't process it in the moment that was what was happening. Yeah. Because you want to think that's not what's happening right now. And I think also because I knew I was trapped, like the tube every minute or whatever you can get off, like that, I was like 15 minutes till the next stop. I was like, I can't go anywhere. I'm on like a rammed train. Do you know what I mean? And I think I was also afraid that if I spoke up and no one helped me, that then I've just drawn attention to the whole situation and potentially escalate it further, because that's obviously what we think about a lot.
So you were afraid that people might think you're just playing victim and there's nothing wrong?
Yeah, or just like, it's called the bystander effect, where like no one does anything, even though like I like to think humans are inherently good and care about each other and stuff, especially in public spaces. Again, sometimes from their own not wanting to put themselves in danger. But yeah, also, am I just being like, they don't know me, like, am I just being dramatic? We have a tendency to not believe women, or we're trained to kind of not believe women and stuff. And I think, yeah, also in that moment, I think I was just, again, like I think a lot of people, especially men who I talk to about this situation, go, oh, I do this and I do that and whatever. And I think you also think that until you're in that situation, and then it's a very different story, because you don't know how your body your body's reaction is going to be. But also, yeah, I think in that moment I was like processing, trying to weigh up what was the best thing to do. What do I do? And then I was like, obviously I don't want to, like, what if he is going to be violent or whatever? I don't want to escalate the situation. If I draw attention, it might make him angry. And I know I'm stuck here. Like I can't get off. We're on a on a moving train, trapped. So, and then I think like then I got off at the next stop, but had to get a taxi. But basically, because the trains in the north, they're like loads of the time they'll just get to a stop and be like, we've got no more train crew, everyone get off. So I was like, I would have got off anyway, but I got off because, you know, that situation. And then I was like, now I have to get in another vehicle with a man I don't know, trapped. It's like 45 minutes to get back because there was no more trains. So it was like, and that man didn't do anything. Like, you know what I mean? A completely innocent person. But I was literally like, It was late, quite late at night. I didn't want to call my parents to be like, drive 45 minutes to come and get me, 45 minutes back.
Yeah.
I mean, they would have, but you know, it was just, I'm here. And I know statistically he's probably not gonna, but
Yeah.
after that, I've just gone through that. Now I need to get in another vehicle with a man I don't know, trapped for 45 minutes. It was quite like, you know, a daunting experience. And as I say, I like to think I'm pretty confident. I'm pretty like, you know, I'm quite a rational person. I guess I'm not kind of a really anxious person or anything. So think if it was someone who was more anxious, or it was a younger girl who hadn't experienced those things before.
Yeah.
You know, and then it is just every time I get on the train, I do think about that, you know, every single time.
And you shouldn't have to.
No.
You shouldn't have to. So thank you for sharing that moment. And it really gave me an insight into how you feel. And I've actually had a similar incident where I was put in a very awkward situation, and I haven't told a lot of people about it because of shame. And I'll share it with you because I think it's important for men to talk about how they feel, right? So I was on a train, I was on a platform, tube station, a very tall, muscular man who was wearing summer clothes in the dead of winter, walked up to me, looked me up and down. So immediately I knew that something may not be right.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, I tried to pay no attention. I was reading a book, I looked down, I get on the tube, I get on my carriage, I realize there's no space where I got on, so I walked to the far end, stood there, turned around, and he was right behind me. So now I'm thinking, this is interesting, he's staring right at me. He takes a seat on the end of the aisle, and I'm stood there near the door, and he's looking at me the whole time. So straight away, I'm thinking, how do I protect myself? Could I beat this guy up?
Yeah.
Well, that's the first thing. If I had to have a fight, would I be able to take this man on? And he was like 6'5". I'm 5'10", right? 5'11". So I knew that wasn't an option. Okay, so what do I do? Head down. He then stands up, and every few seconds takes a step closer towards me. Now this is, my heart's going to go, right? No, what people are looking, but no one's doing anything. Next thing I know, he stood right in front of me, looking at me, staring at me. He's got a bum bag in front of him, which is got his hands in something. What has he got in his bum bag?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it acid? Is it pepper spray? I did not have the confidence or the strength to look up at him. So I thought, if I look at him, he's going to do something. Yes. If I look down, he won't do anything. I can imagine he's not there. Train comes to a stop. The doors open. I knew I had to get out. I didn't want him to follow me out. So I waited until it went beep, beep, beep. And the last moment I slid out, the door shut. He looked at me through the glass, put his hands up and licked the whole glass, right? And I thought, wow, what the hell was that? Like, what did this man want? Did he want to sexually assault me? Did he want to hurt me? Was he racist? What was going on?
Yeah.
But it was a really, really horrific incident. And I haven't told a lot of people, because how do I go and tell my friends that, guys, some tall dude did something really weird and I don't know what his agenda was. I told a few people, but that gave me a really true insight. Not that I didn't understand before, but what it feels like for someone to put that sort of pressure and cross boundaries which shouldn't be crossed. Yeah. And I look back at it and I think, why did that happen to me? I'm quite a spiritual, deep guy, but I think part of it was because having a deeper understanding of women, especially being a father to a daughter, to understand that's a violation on so many levels. And then it got me thinking, and I have always thought this actually, what makes a man do this to a woman? What must a man have had to go through to feel like it's okay to put his hand on your leg, to go and to go and touch a woman in a way she shouldn't be touched without her consent, to verbal abuse, to whatever it might be? What is it in them? Is it childhood? Is it a lack of love from the mother? Is it not ever feeling a woman's touch? Is it lack of confidence? Is it depression? Is it being heartbroken and wanting to take it out on every woman?
Yeah.
So from your experience and from the work that you've done, have you tried to do a deep dive into male behavior? Because not all men are like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to say a majority of men are respectful and would never want to make a woman feel anxious or uncomfortable. What is it about certain type of men that they think it's okay to do it?
I think there's so many elements to it. And, you know, we do, as I say, we do work with men more at the moment on like a men who want to help and be part of the solution. But even a lot of them say, I used to be really misogynistic, or, you know, a lot of them have been on, kind of hate the term journey because it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but, you know, they've been on a whole, like they weren't the way they are now. And that gives me a lot of insight as well. As I say, I think we always operate with this idea of the scale, right? And there's obviously men at the end, like the men you're talking about, who actually perpetrate this behavior. And it's the minority. It's still too many because obviously, basically every woman has a story. And I always say, you know, they're not doing a world tour. Like it's a lot of men. Like it can't be every woman and 0.000% of men. Like it's just not possible. But it is still the minority of men who are actually perpetrating that most severe form of behavior, right? But it's everyone else along the scale. And come back to that, it's not just men, it's people of all genders, but men typically are in more positions where they can influence in a positive way other men. You know, from like a role model perspective or like friendship or whatever. And it's kind of, you know, we say there's people who perpetrate, and then there's people who maybe do kind of more of like the catcalling, the things that, if you want to call it, kind of lower level. And that comes from more of like an entitlement place. You know, society kind of unfortunately conditions us to think of women as objects to obtain rather than, or men to think of women as objects to obtain rather than, you know, human beings. And, you know, that kind of, there's also this mentality that women do things for men's attention and stuff like that. Whereas like a lot of women do just, you know, like a lot of women say, like, I wear these clothes because I want other women to give me compliments. It's not that men will like these clothes. Like, I know they won't like these clothes. And I think, you know, it's quite a different mindset when it comes to the way that we approach like relationships as through societal conditioning. Because as I say, it's like, you know, obviously historically, like men were expected to be the dominant person and all that kind of stuff. And it ends up creating these blurred lines where it's like you said, men approach men, you know, again, like in more traditional gender roles and stuff, you know, men are expected to be the ones to instigate the conversation or ask someone on a date or whatever it is. And so it creates quite a lot of kind of grey areas, blurred lines, that kind of thing. But we also have people, as I say, take men who are kind of at the upper end of that scale, who are aware there's a problem, who get it, and they just want to know how to help in a way that isn't kind of speaking for women or whatever. But then you've got everyone else along that scale where it's like, okay, you might never be a perpetrator of that violence, but if your friend did it, would you say something? Or if you saw someone, if someone made a joke, would you laugh at it? Or even if you wouldn't laugh at it, would you flag that behavior? Because the thing is, you know, a lot of the time, whatever someone's doing in person, they're potentially doing a lot worse behind closed doors. And that is another thing for women. The most unsafe place for them to be is in their own home. It's not the violence on the street. It's not harassment in public spaces. By far the most dangerous place is in your own home. So even going back to that conversation about being robbed and stuff, that's in public. You're not thinking about that, you know, in the place that's supposed to be your safe space. You know, and a lot of men who kind of, this is like also what we talk about, is a lot of the behavior starts small. You don't tend to go from like never doing anything to being a super violent perpetrator of sexual violence. You know, it might be catcalling, it might be flashing, it might be, you know, touching someone in public, whatever, and it will get progressively worse. So this is why I also think it's so important to start with these low-level behaviors, because it's potentially where you can catch people early before they build up the kind of confidence and all this kind of stuff. I think a lot of it is, you know, this is why I think like it's so important that we can create change. I think a lot of people like to put it down to human nature and say, oh, men are just like these instinctive creatures. And there's a lot of evidence to dismiss that. And a lot of it is through upbringing, societal roles and all that kind of stuff. And again, it is a lot of the gender roles that we also push on men, in the sense of like not to be emotional, not to be the protector, provider, all that kind of stuff. But we've almost like gone down this weird path where it's like being a protector means to be dominant rather than to take care of people. Yeah. It's like we've kind of, like a lot of people do with a lot of things, kind of manipulate it for own gain. And I'm not saying individuals, but more of at a societal level. So I think there's so many, there is so many things. Like when you look back into people's history, it's like people who commit violent crimes in general tend to have had, like, if they're abusers, they tend to, it's like the bullies become the people who have been bullied become the bullies. It's that very not having positive role models. A lot of the time it is when people have been brought up by single mothers, but often single mothers get the blame, whereas it's like they're the parent who stayed and did the best they could. In that situation, if there is a single mother, it's the dad who then left the household or didn't set the example. And often it is where we don't have these positive examples of like relationships, like seeing your dad treat your mom with respect and as a human, or seeing your dad abuse. That's going to paint two completely different ideas of what a woman's role is, how you can treat them. And as I say, a lot of people, I mean, there's so many different reasons, but it is unfortunately like a bit of a slippery scale where people will start low and have that kind of entitlement or whatever because of societal conditioning, and then over time it can get progressively worse as you get away with more stuff, because a lot of the time people aren't held accountable for the behaviour.
You've made so many valid points, and I love that. As one thing I want to add, that you guys may have noticed, but through the work I do with men, that I think can affect behaviour. Mm-hmm. And it's this. Men who lack confidence and self-love will hurt others.
100%.
Reason why? They want validation, right? So now, a man who lacks confidence knows he can't actually go up to a woman and talk and chat. I say chat her up, talk to her, approach her in a way that he would get her attention and her number. Yeah. He knows he can't do it. Yeah. He knows he hasn't got the confidence. He hasn't got the resources. Yeah. He's not a good catch, whatever. Yeah. But guess what? He wants a little kick, right? Yeah. He wants some attention. Yeah. He will do it knowing what the outcome will be, because he's getting something from it. Because lack of self-love, lack of self-confidence, right? Yeah. A confident man who loves himself and has worked for himself knows, I can approach women. I've had very positive experiences with women. He won't get the same kick out of trying to do that to a woman because he respects himself. Yeah. The feeling of being rejected by a woman doesn't make the man feel good. Yeah. So a confident man with self-love doesn't ever want to have that feeling because he knows he deserves more. Yeah. And so he will not seek validation in that way. Yeah. If he does see a woman who he finds attractive, he will approach her in a way that he knows will bring comfort, but also in a way that shows leadership and confidence, which women respect. And the woman will immediately know this is a confident man. Yeah. He's well put together. He's approached me in a way that I don't feel threatened by. And for her, that's something she would admire. This guy, he looks good. He's been very respectful. Yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation with him. Yeah. Where it might be in a coffee shop, whatever. And I think that is one of the root causes and what we do within our work is if men can learn to heal, build confidence, empower themselves, they would never want to treat a woman or approach women in that way. Yeah. Because their self-respect wouldn't allow that to happen. Because they don't want kicks like that. It means
they don't need that validation.
It's worthless to them. Yeah. They don't need it. They feel good.
We have this conversation a lot because, as I've said to you, we get a lot of men on the daily, sending us very extreme messages. And, people are often like, well, why do you work with, people like, oh, all men are bad. And like, why do you work with men and all this kind of stuff? And I always validate people, like women feeling like that, because as we've already talked about, there are unfortunately so many women who have never had a positive experience with a man in their life. Every family member, partner, whatever, has caused them harm. Yeah. But the more that we don't focus on healing men, essentially, the more we push men further down the path in which they become violent or whatever. And I always say, like, the men who are leaving us these comments and stuff, I feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not excusing the behavior. I don't think it's okay to send us death threats every day, but I pity them because I know it's a projection. Like, you don't need to sit on Facebook and send us hate if you've got a happy, fulfilled life. It's something missing. And that's why the focus has to be on that, because it's mutually beneficial for everyone if we, heal men, if that's kind of how we want to put it. And I also think like a lot of, and maybe you'll have a take on this, I guess, but women typically have a lot of like very deep relationships with other women where they don't necessarily feel that same pressure or need to get a partner, because they can kind of fulfill those emotional connections in other ways, whereas men have been taught not to do that for such a long time, and that, like we say, can't show emotion and that kind of thing, that they're seeking that validation more from women, whereas it's kind of like it's not women's job to heal men, but also if we just promoted more positive relationships, open relationships with men, and I know there's a lot of men out there who are working on doing that, and like you, like creating those spaces where it's not that you're less of a man. If anything, you're more of a man. You're more secure. You're more confident. Like, we have to rewrite this, what being a man is. It's not being closed off. It's not, it's the complete opposite of that, because that is, that is what we should be working for men's benefit as well as everyone else's. And it's really important that, especially, people want to write off, we've got movements like 4B and stuff where it's like women, we're not having any more boys in this world kind of thing. Like that, this is I think it's starting in Korea, but it's like a whole movement where it's like women aren't giving birth to men, right, essentially, or like they're not giving birth so that we don't have more men. And again, I understand where the anger and the fear and all this comes from, but the more we create this division, the ultimately more unsafe women are, right? It's not that I love the fact that that's the way the world is, but I want women to be safe. I want everyone to be safe, but I want us to reduce the violence. And the more that we can create a positive alternative path that benefits men, but also as a consequence, makes violence towards women less likely. Yeah. And it comes, like you said, it comes so often from like a lacking or a need for validation, or, something missing that they feel like they can't get otherwise.
Yeah, it's so true what you said. I see it all the time with the men that I work with who have come out of difficult relationships. Yeah. And they try to do everything to make the relationship work, and the woman's still left. So now they feel worthless. Yeah. Right. So a couple of points I'd like to make. The first is what I think people sometimes forget with men. And let's talk about dating, right? Mm-hmm. A man and a woman are together, they break up. The man's heartbroken. Mm-hmm. The woman might also be heartbroken too. Yeah. But the woman can, she's got her friends to talk to. She goes out. Yeah. Men approach her, not saying she's looking for that. Yeah. But there's attention, there's distraction, there's, okay, if I wanted to find a new partner, I know I'm feeling good. It's like, there's this community around her. Yeah. But a man goes into a very lonely, dark place when he goes through heartbreak. Yeah. And sometimes in order to get himself to a place where he feels good, he can do stuff disrespectful to women, right? Yeah. It might start with porn, then it might start with inappropriate approaches. But for a man to get back out and start to try to date, he has to work his way up to a place of confidence and self-worth. Yeah. That's a difficult journey, right? Yeah. And a lot of men stay stuck in that place, okay? And then they become perpetrators, or along the scale, they start doing stuff, right? So the work that we do is positive male role models, right? Is trying to show men that if you cannot be comfortable in your own company, if you can't rely on yourself enough to fulfill your emotional needs, then you're always going to need someone for a crutch. Yes. And really, when a man has purpose and vision, when a man knows his worth, he can go through this world alone. Yeah. Okay. But society is not showing us how to do that. And so we have issues like what you guys are talking about. And the work that we're trying to do is show men that you are enough, right? Yeah. Before you even ever think about bringing a woman into your life or a partner, you should be enough for yourself. You have to be okay on your own. And there's a lot of broken men.
And this is how you find the right relationships,
Yeah.
because you're way more likely to meet someone to create a healthy relationship if you don't need them, but
Yeah.
they add to your life, right? Like it's not
Yes.
out of necessity. And I think, you know, there's a lot of things that we talk about. For example, like obviously throughout history until very recently, women had to be in relationships because they couldn't do certain things. They couldn't get credit cards, mortgages, all this kind of stuff. So men didn't have to necessarily do as much of the work.
Yeah.
Now we're finally at a point, in obviously not everywhere, but say take the UK, where women for the first time can survive alone. They can be single and live, kind of thing. And it obviously then puts more pressure on men to do better. But that's not to blame. The narrative a lot of the time, especially in the more toxic sides of like the internet and stuff, is that so women are causing this problem. But it's just that society needs to adapt to this new, more equal world that we're building. And, you know, it's not that women, I think most humans want relationships, right? They want connection and all that kind of stuff. Like it's a human instinct. But a lot of women don't seek them because of bad experiences, because of safety and all this kind of stuff. So if we can kind of heal everyone together, you know, it's not necessarily that all women just don't want to be in relationships and that kind of thing. It's just that through a lot of lived experiences, and as we say, almost like men never really having to, what's the word? As I say, I think for so long, it was like women had to be in relationships, so they just kind of had to choose what was best out there.
But do you think women want that? Because I had a psychotherapist on here.
Yeah.
And he said something really interesting. He said, the way we talk about the masculine and the feminine,
yeah,
right? For a harmonious relationship,
yeah,
the masculine and the feminine have to be aligned.
Mm.
And in a relationship, the masculine, the man, is the banks, and the feminine, the river, flows through the banks that the man creates. But because men are losing and are forgetting what it means to be masculine, the women are starting to happen to be the banks too. They're trying to do what men were meant to do for a masculine and a feminine relationship. And so we talk about women being more independent, women doing these things, but is that actually what women want? Or do women not want their man to be what we talk as, you know, the protector and the provider? And we can say that without it seeming like the wrong thing to say. There's roles, right? In a relationship, everybody knows for something to be harmonious, you want it to be like two hands that come together and
absolutely.
fit, rather than fingers that are colliding.
Yeah.
And at the moment that happens because men are forgetting what it means to be men. But also, men are sometimes afraid to be men because they don't know how to express themselves in a healthy, respectful way, right?
Yeah, I think that from everything that we do, I think most people want a partnership. They want, like you said, two people that fit together, that make sense together, that fulfill where one maybe lacks the other, you know, bring different things to the table. I think for so long we've identified certain things as masculine and feminine. I mean, I actually wrote my dissertation on this at university, but more around entrepreneurship specifically. But there is so many things that we typically associate. Like, for example, it's like women are the emotional ones, right? That's been the narrative for so long. But actually men have so much empathy and stuff like that. And also, you know, anger is an emotion, and typically men hold more anger. It's just the way we've painted it. So I think it's a lot more about, I think absolutely, like there are still people that want those traditional roles, and then you find those people. But I think most people want someone that kind of creates this partnership, that creates this like fulfills those gaps, you know, where they maybe lack, or I want to do this, you want to do that. I think it's quite like a traditional way to look at it, where it's just, you know, women want to, I don't know, stay at home, and like a lot of women want, I know it wasn't, but like a lot of women obviously want careers and stuff, but you know, even again, it's not just because I hear women talking about this stuff, right? We were actually talking about this before because so random, but Married at First Sight Australia just came out, and there's a woman who's like, she's talking about like she's really anti-feminism and all this kind of stuff, and she hates wokeness and whatever. But then the guy that they pair her with, which to me would be makes sense because he's very like, I'm the man, I'm the provider. That makes sense of why they paired them together. But then she basically brings up about, would you be a stay-at-home dad? And he's like, I might as well wear a skirt, right? That's the reaction. But I'm like, you ask, like a lot of the time, like you're asking for this. And she had I think it was her or another person, I can't remember, but it's a similar story where like she has her own business. So I'm like, you're
contradiction.
Yes. And it's like, I think a lot of the time there's still that internalized misogyny where I'm like, I'm so okay if a woman wants to be a stay-at-home mom, she wants to do the cooking, the cleaning. If that's your choice and you can find a man who wants to play the other role, absolutely. Yeah. Like every single relationship is different and people want different things, but it's more the conditioning that a lot of women maybe think they want it. And then when you actually dig in, you kind of realize they don't, or they grow up in households where that's the way that it is. So they think that, you know, it's like that classic thing of talking about Christmas where it's like in most households, all the men are sat watching the TV and all the women are in the kitchen. Yeah. And it's just like, a lot of women will say, oh, I just love that. Like, I love serving and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's fine. But do you, and some women do love it, but do you love it? Or have you been conditioned that that is your job and the only way to make men value you? Like women will say, I like it when men cackle me. Not a lot of women say it, but some women do. And inside I'm like internally dying because I'm like, that's because you've been taught that your only value is what you look like. And that's the only way you're getting like attention and stuff. It's not necessarily coming from a place.
Yeah, I get it.
Do you know what I mean?
I love that.
I think it's like really important. And I think it's just important to explore. I think we kind of, there's definitely like a balance of masculine and feminine traits, but I don't think they necessarily have to come from the man and the woman or whatever gender. You know, there's a lot of kind of gay couples or whatever where they will kind of fall a bit more into one role or another. But I think that's always really interesting to talk about because household labor and all that stuff tend to be split a lot more equally because there's not the same gendered expectations. So I always think like, like different relationships of like different genders and different kind of combinations of genders are so interesting. Yeah. Because we just kind of don't like a lot of women say that they don't realize until, you know, women who maybe have been in heterosexual relationships and then later in life come out or decided they were like, you know, came out as bi or lesbian or whatever, and they've kind of experienced a different relationship and they're like, that was just always my expectation because of being a woman. I think it's so interesting.
That is really interesting.
Because obviously we're talking about more heterosexual relationships here, but I think it is just that idea of completing one another. Yeah. And I think a lot of people want that. A lot of people want like human connection and to have someone to spend life with. I think that's very normal. It's just, I don't think it has to come in the same way that's always been painted because also it puts men, as we say, if the idea is that men don't show emotion or whatever, that doesn't create a healthy relationship for anyone. Like you need to be able to communicate and talk about things and process trauma and whatever else. So
So what you said really resonates with me because in Indian culture, the women do the cooking, the cleaning, the men sit there. And I notice it so much more and it really gets me angry because even though I feel like men have a role to play and they should be more in their masculine, that doesn't mean they don't help and do stuff. I actually get frustrated when I think, what gives you the right to think that you can just sit there and do nothing? Like a true man wants to help out. Like this is my family.
Yeah, that's being a provider.
Yeah, that's being a provider. Let me help out. Yeah. Oh my God, there's loads of dishes to do. Let's do it together. Yeah. There's lots of cooking to do. How can I help you? That's a man, right? What I think causes a lot of problem with men is they don't have the emotional language to express how they feel, right? So I did a video recently about emotional safety for men in a relationship. What does that look like? How often do you hear men talk about emotional safety? Yeah. What does that even mean, right? And so many men go through very difficult relationships because they're hurting or they're being hurt and they don't know how to communicate their pain, right? And because they go through that pain and they're heartbroken, they do not know how to interact with women, right? And I know it's not, Hassl doesn't just deal with male and women violence, but I'll use this as an example.
Yeah.
Is that if men could communicate better and say, look, I need you to show up for me in a certain way.
Yeah.
Okay, what you're doing right now is hurting me.
Yeah.
Like, you are not trusting me. You're accusing me of things which I have not done.
Yeah.
And that's causing me to pull back.
Yeah.
And because I'm pulling back, you think I don't love you. And you are now making up other things or accusing me of stuff or whatever it might be. But do you know how you make me feel when you say that?
Yeah.
Right? Men do not have those kind of conversations, right? But I think if they did, and if we could help educate men and women that, you know, if you treat a man like this, he's going to end up doing this.
Yeah.
And that's going to make you feel like this.
Yeah.
Right? If there was that understanding, I think we have much healthier relationships, and men and women would treat each other with more respect.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just not done. That's not spoken about. And it's something I really want to try to push and change, because I see unhealthy relationships. I see men who are come out of difficult relationships. And I think to myself, if they had just communicated better, if the man had said, these are my boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication is everything.
That would change.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you think that would impact the work that you do, because I know you said something, and I've read it, is these are the symptoms, but there was a root cause.
Yeah.
Right. So it'd be interesting to hear, how, in your opinion, how do we tackle the root cause of the problem? What can men learn that they do not know, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, like, communication is so important. And I do think in a lot of ways, women have a lot more practice because we have typically more deep conversations, and it's even like women tend to speak more than men in conversations and stuff. And I do think a lot of the time forge kind of deeper connections with friends, particularly, so they have maybe more practice of communicating their needs and their boundaries in certain ways. And like you said, a lot of the stuff that we teach, especially men as they're growing up, is to not talk about these things and to not communicate and stuff. And I think it's really important to know that, I think this is where some of the frustration comes from, is like, the world how it is today was built by men to benefit men. It doesn't benefit all men, and it doesn't mean that men don't suffer as a consequence, but it was built largely with men in positions of influence and power, and that's how we've got to the world that we're in, right? And so I think that's where some of the frustration comes from, and some of the disconnect comes from with women, is like, men built this world to benefit men. Obviously, not necessarily the men that are alive right now. But, you know, the system is set up to put men at an advantage typically. And, you know, the reason that we talk about protector and provider a lot of the time was also for men to not be held accountable when they like abused their partners and things, you know, like historically, for example. And so I think it's really important, one, for men to recognize that there is like a lot of frustration there, because it wasn't largely women that created the society that we are now in. It's not to say that, you know, we always talk, it's the same with privilege. It's not to say that you can't suffer even if you're a privileged person, but it's to say that you have to recognize how your gender or your ethnicity or whatever puts you at an advantage. Like, I'm disadvantaged in some ways for being a woman, but I'm white and I'm straight and I live in a country where it's largely safe, you know, it's not conflict and stuff. So it's about recognizing like my white privilege, my straight privilege, whatever. It doesn't mean that I can't also suffer in other ways or suffer with mental health or whatever it is, but it's recognizing that how the system is designed to benefit me as being a white person, for example. And I think that's a really important conversation to have, and sometimes a really tricky one to have, especially with straight, white, cis men, because they've never been at a disadvantage necessarily because of their race or their sexual orientation or whatever it is. It's harder to understand how that feels. It's harder to kind of put yourself in those shoes and that kind of thing. And as I say, I think there's a disconnect because women get frustrated because like, why don't you just get it? And then especially white straight cis men who have never, it's really, especially if you're like wealthy and stuff like that, it's quite hard because you've never experienced being in a position of oppression in some ways.
So how do we get those men to get it? How do we
Yeah.
create an understanding for them? Because that was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Is like, I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And like I've said earlier, I always think of my daughter and my own self-worth.
Yeah.
That never lets me treat women in that way.
Yeah.
But how does a man who, let's say he hasn't got any kids.
Yeah.
Let's say he is 25 years old.
Yeah.
Let's say he's white and straight.
Yeah.
And let's say he's in middle class.
Mm-hmm.
But he thinks it's okay to whistle at women. He thinks it's okay to, oh, I love how you doing, and put his hand on, lower.
They
on your
don't see
back.
what's wrong with it.
Yeah. How do we get through to that man?
So our strategy, and a strategy that I obviously believe should be adopted in the wider world, is firstly I say we're like working down that scale. So rather than going in at perpetrator level, a lot of the time you're not necessarily going to stop violence completely. Like there's going to be a world where there's always going to be some people, no matter what you do. It's about creating a culture where that's not okay. It's about everyone else who can get on board. It's not men versus women, it's everyone versus perpetrators. And it's how do we gradually work down that scale? Because right now, as I said to you, we started with women because I knew if we created a social media profile and we were like, we're teaching men how to, it wasn't going to work. Like that, we were never going to get anywhere. So we started with women, and we started having, women who would share it with, because we tried to create really relatable, rather than, as again, statistics and stuff, human stories, relatable POVs, things like, what I was saying to you, women especially are taught, scrape them if they do something, because he will get their DNA under your nails. That's like a very common message. That like most women know, or like leave a strand of hair so that people know that you were there if you're in a situation.
Wow.
Know how to kick out the light in the back of boot of a car, because then you put your hand through, and that's how you can, if someone kidnaps you, like all this stuff, it's just like so built into us to think about these things. We start with kind of those relatable scenarios, and then, if women have men in their lives, like you said, if it's maybe like their parent or their brother or their partner or whatever it is, that they've had certain conversations about, that they're like, you're a really decent person, but you maybe just don't really get what my day-to-day experience is. They've started to share these with them. We've created campaigns that we've got one that's got about 6 million organic views. That's just, it's called Contradictions, and it's all the contradictory messaging we're told. Like, it's like, take a train so there's people around. No, take a taxi so people can track where you are. Like, so it takes you to your door. Like, but we're constantly fed this contradictory messaging, and it's like, you never know what's right to do. And a lot of men don't necessarily understand that, because they think, like we've talked about, there's certain things that you can do to keep yourself safer. Whereas actually so much of the messaging is like, do this, no, do the opposite. Because that's how, it's like, don't respond, because then you won't trigger him. And it's like, no, but if you don't respond, it could trigger him, because it's just like a no-win situation. So we kind of started with that. And as I say, over time, we're trying to work down that scale. So right now we're at a point where it's like, okay, the men who get it, like get the problem, but just feel like, I don't want to speak over women. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I want to help, but I just want to make sure I'm doing the right stuff. We're creating tools for them, right? Like whether it's, we have our monthly focus group where they can literally ask whatever they want. We talk about things that they've come up against, or like how to deal with stuff. Things like bystander tips and all that kind of stuff. And then over time, we want to work down that scale, right? Using the men who get it to speak to other men, because there's a lot of men, as I say, that even as will admittedly as part of our group, that say, I used to think that way and now I don't, or I even had a light bulb moment where this was the thing that made me rethink. And they're the kind of people who can get through to the next level of men who maybe are decent people, but they just aren't aware how bad the problem is yet, right? It's like, rather than just going straight in at perpetrators and telling them, like, don't be violent, which frustrates me, because a lot of campaigns do that. And that's never gonna, violent perpetrators aren't gonna see a campaign for 1 minute and go, yeah, I'm gonna stop being violent. Like, that never happens. It's about creating, like you said, creating better role models, finding men who can relate to other men and start to be like, this is what made me rethink. Because unfortunately, the reality is that men will listen to men more than they will listen to women, especially about certain things. Like, obviously, me talking about being a man is more frustrating for men to hear from a woman than it is from another man. So we've like started, like, a lot of the men now create content for us. They create, like, they give us ideas of like common things that they hear in their circles that we can kind of use as a hook, and then explain it and flip it so that it actually gets through to people. And as I say, over time, it's about working down that scale rather than just going straight in at the end. It's like, how do we over time bring more and more people onto this side so that they can step in, so that they can call out behaviour, so that they can set better examples for younger boys, so that they can set better examples for their friends, their colleagues, whatever it is, become, I hate the word ally, but like become more of an ally and that kind of thing. And then we get to a point where it's like, okay, it's everyone versus this small group. And often I use the example, it's a smaller scale, but like drink driving. Not that long ago, people would drink drive and it would be kind of socially acceptable. Now, if you heard your friend drink, you'd be like horrified. And, you know, and that's what we need to do. We need to do a culture shift. It's not necessary. There's obviously a lot of things that need to be done structurally in terms of like reporting and after the fact and holding people accountable. And obviously kind of, I think, reform, how do I say it? Like restorative programs and stuff for like men who obviously are the most serious offenders. But everyone else on that scale enables it to an extent. And if we create a culture where it is as shameful as drink driving or whatever, that can make a huge difference, you know.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. You've explained that really well. And my mind's just thinking that there's so many things that you're doing that we could partner with you on and help you on, because for us it's to create more empowered men.
Yes.
Right? And when I say empowered, it means that they hold themselves up to a certain standard.
Yeah.
And one of the standards would be respect.
Yeah.
Right? Respect for women.
Yeah.
One thing I'd wanted to get your opinion on, and I find, is male loneliness, right? So a lot of men are lonely.
Yeah.
They're without a partner. And men, young men especially, don't know how to approach a woman. Yet everywhere we see on social media, it says, where are all the men gone who would come and approach me at a bar and who would talk to me? Where's the confidence gone? So women still probably want, they're fed up of online dating. Everyone's fed up of online dating, right? So where else is a man and a woman going to meet, right? Other than socially, which was the norm.
Yeah.
But now men are scared to approach a woman because they haven't got the skills, they haven't got the training, they face rejection.
Yeah.
But then women say that they want a confident man to approach them. So what advice would you give to a young man, a man, who wants to build his confidence and the art of being able to appropriately approach a woman and show his interest and not feel like the woman is going to think that boundaries are being crossed?
Yeah. I think, firstly, it's really important, like the situation you're in, the environment you're in, right? If you see a woman walking alone at night and you think, I want to approach her, it's no reflection on you. It's her lived experiences that she's going to think something's going to happen and you're immediately panicked and you've got your guard up. And even if you did, find the person attractive or whatever, that conversation is not going to go well because all she's thinking about is, I need to survive this situation, right? So like, whereas places like bars or, clubs where you go to actually socialize, where it's a safe environment, where there's other people around, where, it feels like you're having a conversation and then it might lead to that, like people go out, they meet people, that's kind of expected. It's often like if you're caught off guard in the middle of, you've got your headphones and you've got your head down, they're not giving you any signal that they want you to speak to them. Don't do it because that woman is just panicked and got fear and, I think people do, like women do obviously like confidence and stuff, but I also think confidence comes in the fact that like, I have so much respect for a man if he approached me and asked me out or whatever, and I said, oh no, I'm really sorry, like I'm in a relationship or whatever, and he goes, no worries at all, have a lovely day. I'd be like, massive green flag. Like that is, because it's not firstly, you have to think it's not a reflection on you, right? Because people just have different preferences. People are not in the place where they want to be in a relationship. People are already in a relationship. Like there's so many reasons why people get rejected. So I think we need to start teaching boys that rejection isn't because you're lacking. It's just, and I think women sometimes feel like that as well. Like I think, rejection feels like a personal attack and it's often not. But also it is about situations. Like I think go to places as I say, maybe like bars and stuff where people are expecting to have those conversations, you know, when they're with groups of friends, not when they're on their own, where they feel unsafe. Like, you've got to set it up in the right way. And yeah, I think it's also like, you know, there's so many, for example, like Thursday, where it's like they do in-person dating events. So if you don't like apps and you're too scared maybe to do like one-on-one things, just go to stuff like that. People are prepared because they're there. They want to find someone. You know, I'm not saying that some women don't like being approached or whatever, but a lot of the time it's like, you know, if you're just on your way home, you just want to get home, and then you're having to think about, oh, like what's going to happen here. And it's just the whole stressful situation. Go to places where women are looking for people. And confidence doesn't mean dominance. Confidence doesn't mean, you know, it's those kind of behaviors, as I say, when someone, because I've had so many men react where it's like they will get really defensive or call me an ugly bitch or whatever the lovely response is. And I'm like, I have so much, like, I would be more likely to second think the guy who goes,
yeah, of course,
because that shows that you've got confidence, like all that kind of stuff. And I do also think that, which is why we have to create these alternative role models, is like a lot of the kind of manosphere, incel, that kind of mentality is telling boys that it's taking advantage of boys' insecurities and lack of confidence, all that kind of stuff, and saying blame women for this, and in return not making them feel any better about themselves. It makes them just feel worse because they're just saying women want XYZ, right? And it's just about actually getting out and interacting. Like, a lot of these men don't actually have friends that are women, you know, like have platonic relationships with women where you see them as people. And it's not to blame individuals, but there is so much conditioning to be like, women are only objects for your
satisfaction.
Yeah, for you to obtain,
and
right?
Porn's a big deal with that.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things that feed into that mentality. Just surround, like, actually, like, you know, go to, like, there's so many places now that are kind of creating this other path because of so much technology and online stuff, where there's a lot more in-person things in a way. It's kind of like a counter movement. Go to those places where people they're comfortable, they're around people they know, or they're around other people, they're not feeling unsafe. You know, there's people out there that want to be in relationships and stuff. It's just about, making sure that you are aware of the situation and as I say, kind of aware of women's lived experiences, because it is.
Yeah.
A man making a beeline for you in the street is quite terrifying, even if they say, oh, I'm a great person. You know, it's like, I don't know that. You can say that and not be.
So valuable what you said.
Yeah.
I love the idea of it's a situation and the circumstance, not necessarily you. Right?
Yeah, it's no reflection necessarily.
It's a sense of rejection, right?
Yeah.
And you could be really good looking and you might be her type, but she's walking back and it's late and she just wants to get home and she's tired and she's feeling unsafe and she doesn't want this interaction.
Yeah.
And women, what they attracted to is different to men as well. Sometimes it's not just physical. Men are very physical, right? But I also think what it comes down to, what you're talking about rejection, is this sense of self-confidence and self-love. That if you are able to be in your own space and know your worth, if a woman does say no, you don't take it personally. You understand it could be based on our circumstance. And you move on. You're like, okay, do you know what?
Yeah.
It's no problem. You don't leave that interaction thinking, oh my God, am I really ugly? Or
I think that attraction piece is so important as well, because like for me personally, and I know a lot of women feel the same, it's like being approached in the street makes me think that you want me because of what I look like, and that's not who I am.
Yeah. I
want someone who's had a conversation and gone, like, that's the person, that's the brain that I want to spend more time with. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think because women are so often objectified, even if it can come from such a good place, because it's like, I've seen her, I think she's good looking or whatever, it cannot always be read like that. You know, I wouldn't do that because I don't know who they are. I want someone who has a conversation with me and like goes, now I want to, you know, and that is harder in this day and age because we don't do as much in-person stuff. But as I say, I think there is a lot of people out there now creating these like counter movements almost, where they are like axing the whole online thing. And I think, it's just finding those spaces and like connecting with people and actually like not taking it personally if you get rejected, because it's not necessarily anything to do with you.
What you said earlier also is really true, where you said some women who like being whistled at, right? And they get validation. You said there's something wrong with them, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a really important point to make, because sometimes those interactions can lead them to be with men who are not good for them, and they can have bad experiences, and it starts affecting their self-worth, and they have more bad experiences. So the fact that you can actually say, look, you need to check yourself and understand why you're doing these things and what that's causing, I think is really important, because there's male behavior needs to change, and there's adaptations and change for women too. So it's the self-understanding, right? And so I think that's a really powerful point. One thing I want to touch on is, you're the founder of this organization. I'm the founder of my organization, right? And there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
We're trying to create global change. We're not here just affecting a few people. We want to change and create movements.
Yeah.
How, and I'll add to that, is that you have said how you face death threats and all these negative messages, and we don't get that, right? So how have you been able to handle your own mental health, cope with it, pressure? Amy is the woman building this, leading this movement. How has the journey been for you?
I think I always say it's definitely by far the hardest thing I've ever done. And I think one of the things that's quite hard, and I don't know whether you found this, but there's quite a niche group of people that are social impact entrepreneurs, right? Yeah. So you're not dealing just with the stress of having your own business, and that whole side is mentally challenging enough, but then also having the challenge of working in like a social impact space where you can hear a lot of like harrowing things. And, it's like for people who work in charities and things like that, you've got both of those sides of it combined. Like you've got double the pressure of a lot of either people who work in social impact or people who run their own business. So I think that's quite, I don't think lonely is the word, because we have like an amazing community and I have amazing people that I work with and network and whatever. But I think it's quite hard for people to understand that. And also there's so much pressure because you're potentially changing people's lives, and that feels like a huge responsibility. It's not just you're making money for yourself. You're like every decision that you make affects people's real lives. And sometimes like people will message us and be like, I reported because of you or whatever, and I kind of forget that like that's the impact that we are having on a lot of people, because I still feel like we're like 1% into what I want to do. Do you know what I mean? So I think it is really tough. And as this is my whole life. I don't do anything else. Like I don't have a work-life balance. Like this is like everything. And I think it is, especially when you do social impact, because if you're the kind of person who wants to do that, it's like who you are. It's not just, a lot of people go into business to like, even though that's not necessarily what happens, but they go into business because they want like a more flexible lifestyle or whatever. It's like, no, this is like who I am.
All encompassing,
and I think it is really challenging in a lot of ways, because we have people like from both sides who, as I say, we have women who don't like what we do because they feel like we coddle men too much, is the quote kind of that's often used, or we have men that don't like us because they say we shouldn't be, and everyone in between. And we do have lots of like the support has been far more positive than it has negative. I think. I mean, I like just before I started Hassl got diagnosed with ADHD, which is probably like not a surprise. But I think like a lot of the stuff plays into that, where I am just a little bit obsessed, and it is.
You need to be.
It is, you have to be. And, I'm not doing this to make money. I'm never going to be rich out of this or anything. I don't even pay myself right now. That's a challenging thing in itself, to have no salary for more than a year after, being at a point where I was living by myself in London, which is relatively good, in career progression, I guess. And I think it is just like I think one of the things I find hard is like people questioning my like integrity, because I think there's a lot of cynicism out there, and I get it. Like there's a lot of people who are corrupt and taking advantage of people and whatever. I find that that's the thing that like, it feels very personal. And that's the thing I find the hardest, is when people question why I'm doing this, because I'm like, I literally have given everything to this. At every point I've made a decision that's the best ethically, not for any, like that's always, I purposely didn't go for investment because I don't want to ever risk investors putting profit over purpose. Like I've chosen the hard way at like every single point, because like I use my own money instead of, going out and getting investment or whatever, because I didn't want to risk that. I knew that if I owned it, I could never have to compromise on my values, and like I don't want to be in that position. And there's so many decisions like that I've made that people don't necessarily know. So it is hard when people question your like integrity. I think that's like the thing that I find the hardest. But as I say, we've also got, I think I'm really lucky. I have like we have amazing community of like volunteers and stuff. The people that I work with every day are incredible. My family, my friends, like, I think, again, that's a place of privilege. Like a lot of people don't have that.
Yeah.
And that's what, I guess. And all I want to do is solve this problem. And that's like, so I everything else doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah.
And I think it's like finding that purpose that's like bigger than any of your own personal like
I can relate to a lot
dignity or whatever it is.
I think you're doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
Tackling on a big challenge, but you're so authentic in your
Thanks.
approach. And I've interviewed and I've spoke with a lot of people, and I feel like I'm a good judge of character. And to take on something like this, you have to be obsessed.
Yeah.
It has to be your life. It has to be you, really.
Yeah.
I think with these founder-led organizations, we have to live by our word.
100%.
And what people don't also talk about is you put it out there, you say, look, I'm going to create change.
Yeah.
What happens if it doesn't work?
Yeah.
What do people then think? Oh, you tried it, it didn't work out. We have to live with it every single day.
Exactly.
That we're brave enough to say we're going to do this. Most people aren't brave enough to say they're going to go to the gym 3 times a week. Like we're saying we're going to change the world, right? Takes guts. Takes a lot of guts. And I say it because I'm living it.
Yeah, you get it.
So well done.
Thank you.
So as we come to the end of this conversation, we've shared a lot. I've learned a lot. And I've really enjoyed it. But I want to ask if there is anything you think we should have spoken about that we haven't.
I think I talk a lot about trying to be in the mindset of like progress over perfection. I think it's a really tricky balance, and I always say that when I was younger I was definitely a lot worse at this, and I always used to I've always held the same values, but I used to be a lot less tolerant of people who saw the world differently to me. And I think as I've got older, I've been able to much more recognize my privilege, in the sense of like that I was raised to think this way, and that I had access to that level of education and critical thinking and all that kind of stuff that other people don't necessarily have access to. And that it's so important not to not write people off because they're in a different space to you, or I think it's obviously important to build relationships with people, but that kind of think the same way as you and stuff like that in a lot of ways for your own sanity. But I think if you believe that people are inherently not going to change, then there's no point in doing anything. I think we have to, I try and say progress over perfection. I think even for yourself, like you have to just be like, well, how do I do a bit better every day, rather than, I don't expect a man to come in and like within, we'll have certain men that are in our conversations that maybe ask things that are a bit, inside I'm a bit like, oh, but you're asking a question. So there's some part of you that wants to do better.
Yeah. And
that's what we need. We need that, like, as long as there is a path, that's so important. And I think, especially, I always say this, like, especially more on like the left, in terms of like, I guess, values and stuff, like people, there's this cancel culture where it's like, we're very quick to like cancel people as soon as they do one thing wrong, regardless of everything they've ever done right. And I don't think that people shouldn't be held accountable for their actions, especially if they're in positions to influence others. But I think we end up running the risk of it being like perfection or nothing.
Yeah.
And no one's perfect, because perfection doesn't exist. And also we live in a really imperfect world. Even if you were a perfect person, it's like not actually possible. And it's just kind of, how does everyone do better every day? How do we create paths? How do we give people grace? How do we try and understand like why, You know, I have family that grew up in very different environments to me and have very different opinions to me. And it's not that it doesn't anger me or whatever, but I try and think so much more about why they think the way they do and how do I get through to them and make them, take them down a better path. And I think, I just like, as I say, I think I can say it because I never used to be like that either. So I completely understand how difficult that is. And I think it takes a lot of work to get to a point where you can tolerate people who, especially when I'm so strong in like how I see the world. And it's really hard to hear people who are like racist or homophobic or whatever. And as I say, it's not to excuse that behavior and not call it out and not say it's wrong, but it's like, I either cut you off and then you continue thinking that way, or I try and create a path where we can connect on some level and I can over time take you to a place that better benefits you as an individual, but also the people that you're currently creating a less safe world for in some capacity. So yeah, I think that's really beautiful. Important.
I love what you said, that if someone asks a question, don't judge them on that. The fact that they're asking means that they're willing to change.
Yeah. Or at least just listen.
At least just listen. I think that's such a great way to think of it. And that creates safety, right? So if you have men who are trying to change but they say something wrong, let's not judge them because they asked the question wrong. Let's try to help them through it so they get a better understanding of how to ask better questions or educate them more. And men don't always get treated like that. They get punished if they say one thing wrong. That's what I was talking about, going back to emotional safety. Like, men, we're wired differently. Yeah. We're not as intuitive.
And I think it's everyone's role to do that, you know, like as I say, I don't preach that like women should teach men. Obviously I'm choosing to as a woman. And I think it's important that people are taught from lived experience. And, you know, I think women would also be frustrated if it was men just teaching men with no, because they'd be like, you're not teaching the right things, right? So it is that balance. But I think it's more people in any positions to influence other people, which is technically everyone, right? Like your friends, your family, your community, if you're a teacher, if you're a parent, whatever. It's like, how do we just meet people? Like I always say, just meet people where they are and take them a little bit further up that scale, because you either do that or you push them further into a toxic narrative and it doesn't benefit anyone apart from your own self, like frustration kind of thing. And maybe it sounds very idealistic and it's not easy to do, but I think if you can get to that point, or at least we can build organizations that have that mentality, even if you don't on an individual level, that's how we actually have a chance to create effective change.
That's so true. One video I put up recently was that, you know, in acting, when you do a scene or you play a role, you're told the character's backstory to get an understanding of what they've been through to get to that moment.
The context,
We don't do that with people.
No.
We don't understand the backstory of what's made them think like that. Why are they showing up like this in this moment?
Yeah.
If we did, we wouldn't judge them just as they are then. We'd have a great understanding of where they've been. Yeah. If we can understand where they've been, we know who they are as a full person, and we can have a better response. Something I try to teach people, which is really nice to hear you say that if we can approach people like that, just generally people would be happier, people would be better understood, we'd have better relationships, both romantically and friendship and family, but we're so quick to judge.
Yeah, and I think also like we, as I say, like I'm talking about like, but I'm talk about as like left, typically like more left-wing mentality, I guess, but like this is what like made me change my mindset on it, was like the whole thing I'm preaching to these people is you should be able to put yourself in these people's shoes. Understand, like say, like take immigration. You should be able to put, like I was so frustrated that these people who was like saying horrible things about immigrants, whatever, couldn't put themselves in those people's shoes and understand what journey they've had to go on to be in this situation. And then I was like, but I'm not putting myself in the shoes of the people saying that. How can I preach that they should be putting themselves in those people's shoes, which I think is the way that we create more equality, because everyone, why am I not like doing that same thing? Yeah. How can I be preaching empathy and then not showing empathy
to the others?
It's not to say that I agree or don't hold them accountable, but how can I not show them that same, I'm so good at it for people that are marginalized. So I need to use that. I can't preach that on one and then not use it for people who don't hold the same views as me. And I think sometimes we forget that, like the empathy piece has to come to people that we also don't.
Yeah, I love that.
That are maybe the oppressors sometimes.
Yeah. Well, look, on that note, I just want to say thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. Inspired, proud. I can see where you're going to go with this, and I can see us doing stuff together. I can see it.
Absolutely.
And it's been a real pleasure. I've learned a lot, as I always want to learn. And there's so much we can take from this and share with our community too. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.